Well, a very good morning to you all, wherever you are joining us from across Australia. And actually, we've had quite a few international guests on our webinar in the last few weeks. So pop onto the chat and let us know where you are from. You'll see in front of you there some instructions, and it's a great system, this Demio system. Hello, Sarah from Echuca, but it does have some partnership nuances. It does like certain browsers more than others. And I've got a great little link that I've just popped up on your screens. You'll see at the bottom that says to test your visual connection. Click that, because that will make sure that you can hear and see and do everything that you need to do on this system. Well, welcome Helen from Edenhope, Beryl from Lockington, Julie from Wellington. Goodness gracious. Wonderful to see you all on here today. We've got a wonderful session today, a really useful session that I think you'll all get some tangible takeaways from. Gary from Scone, Emily from Camperdown, Mary from Gingelic, and who have we got? Well, welcome to you all. Kerry from Narromine, Tamsin from Collie, welcome, welcome, welcome. Do that test that's on your screen, because I find that a few minutes in, a couple of people say, I can't see anything or I can't hear anything. And we'd like you to be able to both see and hear today's session. We've got a fantastic guest. It is Lindsay from Sydney Royal. Unfortunately, no Sydney Royal this year, but boy, am I looking forward to 2021. Oh, Kennedy from Mudgee. Hello. Kennedy, you're going to love our guest next week. We've got Shane Fitzsimmons joining us now from New South Wales Resilience, but of course, formerly from the New South Wales Rural Fire Service. Susan from Cairns, great to see you. Peter from Brisbane. If you all want to do that test on your system, that will be the best way to get today started. Neil and Veronica from Mangrove Mountain, welcome on board. We've got a really good session for you today, and we are on our 6th webinar as part of the Community Builders series of free webinars brought to you by Rural Aid, the wonderful people at Bank of Ideas, and our sponsors, Bushels. So I hope you've got a cup of tea and you're settled in, because today's a really useful session. I know grants are a big part of every community's conversation, so we want to make sure today that you learn everything you can about how to successfully access grants and the important process of applying for them. My name is Lindsay Douglas. I am based in the Central West of New South Wales, and it's my great pleasure to be your host here today. We do want to acknowledge the traditional owners on whose land we meet, recognising traditional owners Australia-wide for their continuous connection to the land. We pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging. We host these webinars every Tuesday at 10 a.m. So if this is your first one, a big hearty Rural Aid welcome to you. And if you're joining us again, thanks so much for coming back. And we're all about bringing you fresh ideas to help support your community. There's a good component of theoretical information, but also we make sure that you leave with some practically useful tips as well. We've covered all sorts of topics, and of course these were born of COVID, where we want to talk about resilience, about long-term viability. Of course, we've all been impacted by the very unusual occurrences of the last few months. So we wanted to talk about resilience and discovering and fostering leadership. We've talked about mapping your community assets. If you missed that session, I'll actually put the link up because it's a cracker. How to map your community assets as opposed to mapping your community's needs. We've also talked about tourism initiatives. We had a great session with Mark Evans from Paranella Park, and today we're focusing on grants. So we want to talk about the building blocks of a strong community and the role that grants play in them. And each week we've been very fortunate to have one of the most enthusiastic community campaigners I've ever met, a man who has influenced over 2,000 communities, rural and regional communities, in terms of their renewal and their rebuilding with great creative ideas and collaboration. And he's going to get us underway today for this session. And that is Peter Kenyon of Bank of Ideas. So Peter Kenyon, tell us, what are some of the key, good morning. You're joining us from where today?
all the way from Kalamunda in Western Australia. So it's really good to be with everyone across this country, and above all, to be with people who are just passionate about their communities. And look, thank you for the feedback you've been sending through and the ideas and the sharing. I think that's great. We started these set of workshops, as Lindsay said, this is number 6, and really it's all around this theme: what builds a great small town? And I suppose what we've done is to say, look, it's really about 4 critical building blocks. We've talked about leadership. We've talked about that mindset, talking about practicing healthy community building practices in terms of collaboration and how we engage people. And above all, how do we develop strong economic development behaviours? How do we strengthen what we've got? How do we grow what we've actually got economically? And the fact that a healthy community and a healthy economy are 2 sides of the same coin. The area today that we particularly want to start to drill into as we talk about grants is this whole idea that really what towns need is that positive mindset. And 2 of those aspects is that one about accepting change and welcoming that new and alternative thinking, but secondly also just about being opportunity obsessive. And today we're going to hear an amazing story about FRRR, the Foundation for Rural and Regional Renewal, and the type of resources and programs. And again, it's just one of those great resources that we can actually build upon. But over last week, we talked about asset mapping. And I thought today it's always good to start with a couple of stories, good to get people kind of like thinking about, what others have done, not to replicate other people's efforts, but to leapfrog upon their experience. And I want to begin by just sharing with you one of my real heroes in rural development. He was a Catholic priest. His name was Moses Cody. He was a Canadian. He was from Nova Scotia in the Maritimes of Canada. He was brought up in the latter part of the 19th century. And as a young person on the land, what he really, really kind of like found hard to cope with was the massive outpouring of young people as they were moving to the cities. And I suppose what he really wanted to do with his life was to give people, and particularly young people, a reason to stay on the land. And so he dedicated his life, even through the church, in terms of how do you kind of like help people to kind of like build community and build local economies. And he had a famous quote: if we are wise, we'll help people everywhere to get the good and abundant life, to become masters of their own destiny. And I really encourage everyone to somehow track down a copy of this. You can get copies online and whatever, but it was really his story. It was the only book he put together, but it really captured his kind of like whole philosophy. And he was motivated by 2 things. One was he had a famous statement called weird pessimism. And he said, why are we caught up in that? Why do we always want to start with the half-empty bit of the glass? Why do we always have conversations about what we don't have? What's really important is to develop an optimistic mindset, and the way to do that is to start with what you have got. Start with the half full, not the half-empty bit of the glass. And subsequently, he, I believe, is the first person who really started to develop the concept we know as asset-based community development. He never once used the word asset. He talked about people's capabilities. He talked about people's contributions. But when you read his book, you realize that this is the guy who really got that going. And I just wanted to share with you this amazing quote he left us: we are motivated by what we don't have to use what we do have to get what we want. And his lifetime, particularly during the 1930s and as a response to the Depression, and above all his motivation of how do we get young people to kind of like stay on the land, stay in rural areas, come back to rural areas. And he applied that, and he worked with very poor farmers and fishermen, and he basically introduced a whole pile of cooperative concepts. And over a less than a 10-year period, he was responsible for probably well over 1,000 co-ops being set up in the Maritimes, mainly in Nova Scotia, in areas like retail, in areas fishing co-ops, agricultural marketing co-ops. He was just amazing. And he always came into community and said to people, start with what you got. Do an asset map. Find out what it is that you've got in your own community and begin to kind of like work with that. So I really just wanted to share Moses Cody, just one of our great inspirational rural leaders whose ideas and motivation, I think, are just so relevant for today. But in closing my little session this morning, I thought I'd just give you 2 what I think are very funny, very amusing, and very inspiring stories of what two New Zealand small towns did when they started to look at what they had. And the first is a town called Bulls. And I can remember this town back in the early 1990s. It has an amazing asset. It sits on the intersection of Highway 1 and Highway 3 in New Zealand, probably the most significant intersection you can have in the North Island of New Zealand. But it was one of those towns that people used to accelerate through rather than slow down and stop. And consequently, my first encounters with this town was it was a town full of kind of like empty shops. But I'll never forget a number of locals brought community together and got them talking about what is it we've got as assets and what can we actually work upon. And what I found absolutely inspiring was the fact that they started looking at a whole range of assets. And one guy simply said, you know what? The name, Bulls, we could do amazing things with that. And he was the first that started talking about, let's be kind of like a town like no other. Let's become an unbelievably kind of like bull, kind of like community and whatever. And as he started talking about how we could simply use our name, out-developed this amazing idea where what they decided to do was to rename every business in town and every institution in town with a bull name. And the result has been amazing. There's now well over 200 different bulls as you kind of like come in to this unforgettable kind of like town. It's just amazing how everyone has decided to rename, put up a new sign and work around this kind of like bull kind of like concept. You know, there's a couple of restaurants in town. One's called Full as a Bull. The other is called Delectable. The police station is called Constable. The bank, I love the story of the bank. And this is Bronwyn Means, who was really the catalyst behind developing this idea. And the bank became bankable. But an occasion occurred when these guys came in the middle of the night with a forklift and ran off with the ATM. Well, the organising committee the next day were there at 7 a.m. with a huge banner that they put across the front of the bank saying robbable. And again, just building upon that. That hit the front page of the main national newspaper in New Zealand. The toilet block is called Relievable, and every tourist now wants to be photographed under the sign of kind of like the local kind of like toilet block and whatever. One church is forgivable, and as only one group can have the name, the other kind of like had to find kind of like out of the game in terms of finding different names that people can kind of like relate to, re the bull. The town hall is called sociable. All the rubbish bins are responsible. And you know what? In this town, everything is possible. Boy, you should see the transformation that's had. Bulls has become one of those you must stop at type of place. Instead of kind of like empty car spots, you know, you're lucky if you can find one. And at the last count, it's probably attracted in half a dozen coffee shops, a boutique brewery. There are 3 antique shops in the town. It's an amazing story of reinvention simply by people using a bit of humour and using one of their assets, simply the name Bulls. And that's kind of like build upon it. The other one that I just wanted to quickly tell you is down the road, also on Highway 1 in New Zealand, a town called Tirau. And the story back there is a woman, this is sheep country, a typical little town on Highway 1, typical sheep country. And I can remember driving through this town again in those early 90s when, look, nothing was open after 12 o'clock on a Saturday. In fact, the joke in the town was there was a competition to see how quickly businesses could shut on a Saturday. The result was there was nothing open from midday Saturday through to first thing Monday morning. You couldn't even buy a coffee in this town, despite the fact they were on Highway 1. But I drove through that town probably 6 months ago, and to my amazement, on Sunday morning, I counted 57 businesses open. Now, how do you go from nil businesses to 57? This place has become an incredibly vibrant kind of like tourist town. And really the story behind that was, as a sheep kind of like place, a woman in the town decided to open a wool shop. But unfortunately, she was married to a guy who was a bit of a skinflint. And he said, look, dear, we're not going to rent a building. We own a block of land in the main street. I'm going to build you your shop. And the result was, out of corrugated iron off the farm, he built her shop, which was kind of like a sheep. 6 months later, the town got a small grant to do an information centre, and he convinced them, look, the sheep needs kind of like sheepdog. And so next to it, they kind of like built their tourist office in the form of kind of like a sheep. And so there on the main street, you now have the sheep and the dog kind of like there. But then people began to say, you know what, maybe we've got a new art form here. Maybe this concept of corrugated art could go a bit further. It just happened to be that the church next door to the information centre is the Church of the Good Shepherd. So they kind of like put up this amazing statue, again, all done in corrugated art. And then the thing just started to flow down the hill. It was amazing. Every business then started to embrace this concept of adding to this outdoor gallery town using corrugated art. And boy, the results is incredibly powerful as people have kind of like started to use this creativity, but kind of like building a main street that you just go, wow, this is a town that has an incredible kind of like wow factor attached to it. And so again, simple story, people starting to look at what they got and saying, you know what, we can really build upon this and kind of like do so much more with it. So now we're at that stage, though, of saying, how do we make some of these ideas happen? We know our internal resources. We've mobilised people. Are there some external resources that we can tap into? And certainly for me, one of the great institutions we now have in this country, it's in its 20th year of operation, is this group known affectionately as FRRR, or the Foundation for Rural and Regional Renewal. And boy, has it made an incredible difference to kind of like small towns across Australia. And we're very privileged today to have Carleen Egan with us to kind of like share their story and share how you too might be able to benefit from the type of resources they got. Welcome, Carleen.
Welcome, everybody. Hello, Peter. How are you?
Good. Great to see you. Thank you for joining us.
It's an absolute pleasure, and I'm really delighted to be able to talk to you today about FRRR and some of the grant programs that we have available for small communities in rural, regional and remote Australia. And also the other key part to today, we'll be talking you through what makes strong grant applications, how you can make your application to not just FRRR but other funding bodies stronger, and look at how you can put your story forward and secure the funds that you're needing for your community. So I am going to be this is my first large grant seeker workshop that I've done online. I'm used to being in the room. So I'm hoping that I'll navigate this successfully. I'm just going to take a step back. There we go. Okay. So firstly, and most importantly, to start off with, I'd like to, in the spirit of reconciliation, acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and the connection to the land, sea and community. FRRR pay our respects to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. So to let our audience know, I am in Central Victoria in Bendigo. FRRR's headquarters are based in Bendigo. We're all working remotely still, and feel very, very fortunate to be able to link with such a large audience across such a broad network across the country. I'll take myself off screen just so that I can talk to the slides in a bit more detail. And if you have any questions, I'd be delighted to answer them as we go through. So who is FRRR? I asked Lindsay if she would do a quick poll as part of this presentation, just to get a sense of who we have in the room, so to speak, and whether you have heard of FRRR before. FRRR has been, it was established in 2000, and it really came out of a concern for economic and social decline in rural, regional and remote Australia. And that was at a national summit, a regional summit in 1999. So in 2000, FRRR was established to stimulate and support rural and regional renewal in Australia, and in partnership with government, philanthropy and business. FRRR remains Australia's only national philanthropic foundation to get dedicated to rural and regional Australia. So FRRR believes that where you live shouldn't limit your opportunities, and we truly believe that vibrant, sustainable and adaptive rural, regional and remote communities is not just a good thing for those communities, but significantly important for the whole of the nation. We operate nationally with a focus on small communities, usually have a preference for grant programs for populations of 10,000 and under, but each grant program excuse me, each grant program has its own nuanced guidelines and reaches different communities for different purposes. So we are governed by a board of directors, and feel very fortunate to have that support from the governance aspect of FRRR. And we have a small team headquartered in Bendigo. We have about 24 staff, I believe, at this stage, and we have a couple in New South Wales. And for the whole of the team, we're passionate about small communities and building that capacity and strengthening those rural, regional and remote communities. So FRRR is well known for its grant making component of the organisation, but ultimately we help philanthropy reach rural and regional communities through three different mechanisms. The first way that our main way that we work is through grants. This is a major part of our work. So we offer small and discretionary funds to small regional communities in all states and territories. We do have more applications coming from some states, and we're looking to broaden our reach into other states nationally. And we usually have a grant amounts are between $5,000 and $50,000, although disaster recovery grants can be larger. So what's unique about FRRR is that we have a quite different tax status. So our status as an Item 1 DGR entity means that we can fund non-DGR organisations, providing they are doing the work of charitable purpose. So this means that organisations receiving grants don't need to be deductible gift recipients themselves. Just means that their project needs to be charitable and promote rural and regional renewal and development. So this gives us great flexibility because it means that we can fund lots of local organisations, including playgroups and school committees, any not-for-profits that are doing charitable projects for community benefit. So that's, in a nutshell, our grant-making area. We also helped non-DGRs, not-for-profits to fundraise, and we do that by receiving funds on their behalf for an agreed purpose. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And we also support communities to build their local capacity, to find local solutions and address local problems, and leverage on opportunities as well. So this is a good example of that. We work to support those communities through presentations, also through referring through to other funding sources, We have a suite of information on our website that just can support not-for-profits to seek funds both through FRRR but through other funding bodies as well, and how to make those applications as strong as possible. So at a glance, this has been our last financial year. We have provided over $11.6 million worth of funds to rural, regional and remote communities, including $2.8 million via fundraising accounts. We've also visited over 80 communities. I think that we have a real opportunity post-COVID-19 to reach a lot more communities through these forums. Typically we go and visit those communities, and think that there's real opportunities for us to strengthen our reach, broaden our reach and strengthen our support to communities through forums just like this. In the last 12 months, with the worsening drought and communities affected by floods and bushfires, 45% of our grants support short, medium, long-term disaster response, which includes both recovery and preparedness. So interestingly, New South Wales is the state that we provided most funds to. However, we've made more smaller grants to Victoria. And part of our strategic direction is really looking at how we broaden our reach into states like Western Australia and Northern Territory, and how we support states, particularly Tasmania and South Australia, to apply for funds through FRRR and strengthen those community capacity building projects. So the next slide is going through some of our different grant programs. So we have 3 different streams of grants, and the ones that I'm going to talk today about in that people, place and prosperity stream. So we're really looking at the Strengthening Rural Communities grant program, and I'll also be talking a little bit about the Aussie Cotton Farmers Grow Communities grant program, and the Tackling Tough Times Together and Haywire. So those grant programs I'll be talking about today, the Tackling Tough Times Together grant program and the Strengthening Rural Communities grant program are rolling programs. They're open all year with multiple rounds, so that you can always try to tap into those funds. The other 2, the Aussie Cotton Farmers Grow Communities and the Haywire grant programs are annual grant programs. Our grant programs are in response to the need in community. So while we have those grant programs on our website currently, it's always worth checking to see what's available. Sometimes we're fortunate to receive additional funds for particular areas or particular issues, and so our grant programs may reflect that. So talking before about our special tax status, what this means is that there are some things that FRRR is not able to support. And while I think it's really important for us to talk about, and for some of the stories I'll be sharing, I'll be talking about some of those particular areas that we can support. It's useful for applicants to know what isn't within our scope. So FRRR is not able to fund prizes and gifts and awards, trophies, things that have already happened, projects that have taken place outside of Australia, any projects from political parties, lobby groups or religious groups, things we can't fund, sport and recreational activities that don't benefit the entire community is an area that we're not able to provide funds for. We also can't support projects that are federal or state government core business, but that doesn't exclude government-owned land. There are conditions, but there are some ways that we can definitely support federal and state government departments if it's not something that is within their core business remit. Similarly with local government as well. So while we do have, I think our preference really is on those community-led and identified projects, there will be occasions where we get applications from government bodies and where there's demonstrated collaborative practices, they would be something that we would be able to provide support for. So our Strengthening Rural Communities grant program is probably one of our most subscribed grant programs. We have a great uptake with this one, and we have it's evolving as we speak. We're actually doing a review at the moment and making sure that we're meeting needs in community through this grant program. But basically it evolved from our small grants program, and we have managed to ensure that it stays a flexible grant program, really designed to support the issues and the opportunities that communities have identified. We can fund pretty much anything through this grant program if it's charitable and if it's for community benefit. And that can be things like the repair and maintenance of infrastructure. It could be community events and capacity building such as volunteer training or support and development. It might be heritage, arts and cultural activities. It could be community-based tourism and economic development activities. We do see applications for mental health programs and also for education, lifelong education training purposes, and building economic strength in rural communities as well. And as Peter was talking before about some of those stories and those communities, we do see quite a lot of applications come through that are really dealing with trying to bring people to communities.
I wanted to throw you a question, if that's all right, Carleen. We've just had a couple of questions on the chat, and I thought this might be quite good timing.
Yeah, sure.
Christy on the chat line has just asked about her involvement in 2 equestrian organisations that are based in New South Wales, incorporated, have memberships and host events outside of that jurisdiction. They've obviously been very much affected by drought, bushfire, and now, of course, COVID. Would they be eligible as an equestrian entity that does a lot in rural and regional areas, and how would they reach out to FRRR?
Yeah, great question. And we do see quite a few applications coming from sporting organisations or recreational organisations. For us, it really becomes a question around the primary purpose of the project. If it's for community, if it was doing something that was for broader community, not just members or those accessing the grounds or the organisation, then yes, it would be something that we could definitely consider. What we would ask is that there's demonstrated support. So it could be letters of support, or it may be that they've run events and they've got those newspaper articles or just letters of support. It doesn't have to be formal. Those things demonstrate to us that there's broader community benefit and the beneficiaries are beyond just those accessing that particular service or organisation.
And what's the best way for those organisations to reach out to you?
Yeah, look, I would suggest if it's something that kind of fits in our grey area, I would encourage prospective applicants to call FRRR or email FRRR and just tease out some of those questions. We're so happy to guide applicants around what we need to see, how they can strengthen their application, and while there's definitely information on the website, and I would always recommend that any applicant reads the guidelines thoroughly, because that will usually give some good, it'll tell people the things that we definitely need to see. But yeah, just a call to FRRR or an email, and we'd be happy to talk about those details. And at the end of this presentation, there's all the contact details as well.
I'm going to throw you two quick questions and I'll let you get back to it. One is, in principle, would FRRR support the setup of a community radio, for example?
Yeah, we have seen applications come through, and we have they have been successful for community radio, both in New South Wales and in Victoria that I'm aware of. It would be, one of the important things would be to be able to identify what it is in terms of the expenditure items, what it is that they'd actually be asking for. But definitely we've funded technology. We've also funded training and development for a community radio station as well.
And final question, can you apply for more than one project in one grant round?
No. So one application from the applicant per grant round. Sometimes we do see multiple applications coming through from the same applicant into the different grant programs. So it may be that they've applied for Tackling Tough Times grant program, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, but that's specifically for drought impacted communities. But they might also equally fit the guidelines for the Strengthening Rural Communities grant program, so they might put an application in there as well. If you're really wanting to secure the funds, I would talk to the FRRR team, and we can guide you as to which is probably the best avenue to try to secure funds. Thanks for those questions. I'm going to slide just around the Strengthening Rural Communities grant program. So just quickly, we have two streams. We have a small and vital stream, which is up to $10,000. It's open year round, and the larger leverage is another stream, which is up to $25,000. And that one is offered every alternate round. With the Strengthening Rural Communities grant program, we're always trying to secure more funds as conduits to community. We're trying to secure more funds to be able to make more grants. In a grant round towards the end of last year, we were able to support about 19% of the applications coming through, which for us means even when we're getting those applications and we're hearing what's happening in communities, we're able to then advocate for additional funds, and we spend a significant amount of our time doing that. So SRC also has multiple donors for the grant program, and we've paused it at the moment. We'll reopen it in late July. There's more information about Strengthening Rural Communities and these other grant programs on our website. So the Tackling Tough Times Together grant program is really about supporting community-based activities that help and relieve current stresses and symptoms of drought, and most importantly, build capacity and resilience for their future. So we're really looking at those communities coming together, working and being able to identify those opportunities as well as the challenges, and look to apply for funds to really just strengthen their capacity as they move through drought situation. So we really recognise that the drought affects all community, and this grant program is really about allowing the community to still keep doing the things that are important for them, to come together to support one another through drought. So this is open all year, and we have funds that can support activities the grant amounts are between up to 20,000, 60,000 and 150,000. So for the larger amount, it's just there's a slightly different process. But if you're referring to the guidelines on the FRRR website, that'll step you through all of those details. So for those people in New South Wales and Queensland, we also have the Aussie Cotton Farmers Grow Community Grant Program. This one is open for, I think it opens at the beginning of July, and we have grant amounts of up to $5,000 for projects in cotton growing areas. So this grant program is a little bit different because we're actually asking cotton farmers to nominate a deserving not-for-profit community-based group undertaking projects. So this is such a fabulous grant program, and we see this really supporting at the moment those cotton growing areas that haven't been able to grow cotton over the last couple of years. Just a small grant can really make the difference, both as the farmers are able to nominate, but also for those community-based organisations. And the FRRR ABC Haywire Youth Innovation Grants. This is a wonderful youth focused grant program, which is a really empowering way for young people to share their stories and empower them to support their communities. So we have, so this one has just closed for this year, but each year the winners of the ABC Haywire competition gather in Canberra. They share their stories and they discuss the different issues that may be impacting their communities, and they develop ideas for projects to address some of those issues. And then the communities are invited to apply for those grants to make the ideas actually happen. And you have another question for me?
I do. I'm throwing a few at you throughout. Sorry.
Right.
Petra had a great question, which was how many grant rounds a year do you have? I've just shot everyone the grant calendar link to your website, but
Brilliant.
You might have a more succinct answer than that link.
Yeah, look, it does differ year by year. Ultimately, with the Tackling Tough Times grant program and the Strengthening Rural Communities grant program, because they're open all year, we have the 4 rounds a year of those grant programs, and if you get the application in and you just miss the cutoff, it rolls into the next grant program. And those other smaller grant programs that are on the grants calendar, they're annual ones. We have back to school grant program. I don't know actually off the top of my head exactly how many grant programs we have over the calendar year. I will endeavour to find that out. And but ultimately a really great way of having that information come to you is through our e-newsletter. That's a monthly e-newsletter that you can subscribe to, and that information will have all the grant programs that are open, things that are coming up, and any new ones that have also come through, that will come through FRRR.
I've just popped the little link to subscribe to the newsletter on the screen. And we've had another question come through from Shona in Cabargo. They've got a recently incorporated not-for-profit that has been set up to create a low-cost retail business hub for business owners, a town very much affected by bushfires. That model that allows sort of affordable retail space for business owners locally to help them recover post bushfires, would that be something, I know you're not on a panel right now, but is that something that the Tackling Tough Times grant could apply to?
Yeah, look, for bushfire affected communities, we will be having directing our bushfire recovery funds through the Strengthening Rural Communities grant program. So we are still finalising our guidelines for that. we will be endeavouring to support communities to recover in the best ways that they identify. And you know, in terms of businesses applying for grant funds, that would be something that may be outside of our scope. But what I would encourage anyone in those bushfire communities, if you have a need in your community, I'd encourage you to contact FRRR when our grant round opens, and we can talk you through just how we can either provide support for you or provide what other referrals there may be to other organisations as well. Okay, so I'm just conscious of the time, and I know that we want to get to some stories at the end as well as the grant seeking information. So, so in terms of just winding up with the Haywire grant program, grants of up to $10,000 will be provided to those projects in those communities, but it will be conditional on the young people also being involved in the project implementation. So FRRR also has our not-for-profit fundraising accounts, and these are formal partnerships between FRRR and not-for-profits that leverages FRRR's special tax status. We can help attract tax-deductible donations for issues of projects. We can be flexible in what money can be raised and used for, and we can help to build organisational capacity through those fundraising accounts. And there's quite a lot of information on the FRRR website around our fundraising accounts. Okay, so this part of the presentation is really around how do we make applications that are giving not just FRRR but other funding bodies the right information and the best information for those organisations to assess and then hopefully recommend your grant application. So we have 4 key stages that we would encourage all organisations to undertake when they're looking at writing an application. Funnily enough, the writing of the application is the easy bit. Scoping your project and making sure it's really well planned is pivotal to writing a strong application. And Lindsay and I were having a quick chat at the beginning before everyone joined us about the importance of this part. Really, you need to ensure that you have as many people around the table at this planning stage so that you can hear different voices, different ideas. And in terms of the sustainability of projects, the more people that you have involved and that are on the same page, it just really makes your project stronger as well as your application. So the 4 key stages are really around preparation and planning, identifying opportunities, then writing the application, and then the reporting part, which is the bit that most people forget or aren't always wanting to do. However, there's such a great opportunity there to evaluate and tell your story. So your stage 1, preparation and planning, this part is really looking at all of these questions. So you're looking at your what and your why, your who, your when, your where, your how. And by digging into those questions and answering those, you'll have a much better idea of when it comes to actually writing your application. So, you know, what will you be doing? Sorry, there we go. So what do you want to do? So what's your idea? Are you looking to capitalise on an opportunity and work to your strengths and identifying your assets? Or are you really looking at solving an issue? And, you know, be specific about what it is that you're wanting to do. Make sure that those people that are in your community are supporting the project, and where you can demonstrate that support to us is really helpful through other partnerships or those letters of support. So we'd also be asking, why is it needed? Why is this project important to your community? So what problem does it address? How will the community benefit? What should your grant make? Why should a grant maker like FRRR support you? And what will happen if your project doesn't proceed? Sustainability of the project can be really important for you to identify from the outset, and it will be something that we will consider when we're assessing applications. So you're also really, in this stage of the process, really teasing out who will be involved in the project as well, who will be the participants and the beneficiaries and the partners and supporters of the project. With all of these sections, when it comes to writing your application, the more information we have, the better the picture we have, and I would encourage you all to give us more rather than less information. So how will the project be delivered? What are the key project stages? What are the different resources you'll need? Who's going to be responsible? And when will the project happen? With FRRR grants, we're looking at projects happening within that 12 months after receiving funding, and particularly at the moment in the current context of COVID-19, sometimes where those projects can't happen in that time frame, we can definitely make variations for both due to COVID, but other reasons as well, if your project just needs a little bit of extra time. So where will the project happen, and how will you know if the project's successful? How are you going to evaluate it, and how are you going to share your story about your project? If you start looking at the evaluation at the beginning of the process, when you're planning your project, then you'll be able to evaluate it more successfully towards the end. This part is really important for grant makers. We really need to have a good understanding of what the costings are going to be of your project and your expenditure items, but also have an understanding of the income that you also have. So looking at being realistic about your costings and get quotes. Also, all of our guidelines stipulate the information that we require around budgets and financials. And if there's a key thing to take away from today is make sure that you provide that information. So the next part of the grant seeking process is identifying opportunities. So identifying potential funders, and consider the scale of your project and your capacity to raise funds. The grants might seem like the easiest part of fundraising, but it can actually bring on quite a bit of responsibility and quite a bit of work as well. At the risk of rushing through these, I just really want to highlight that these slides will be made available, and we also have this information on our website as well, and we're always happy to have a conversation and provide that information if I'm going too fast. So research your opportunities for securing funds. Have a look at what other projects have been delivered elsewhere. Philanthropy Australia and ourcommunity.com are great resources around other funding opportunities, and as well as your state grant programs, local government grant programs, and other funding sources. When you're seeking funds, it is a bit of a matchmaking effort. So you're really looking at how does your project align with the grant making organisation. Make sure that you read the guidelines thoroughly. That's pivotal to writing a strong application and making sure that all that information is provided, and align your organisation with the funder if you are putting in an application. And if you have any questions, make sure that you reach out to that funding body. So you're planning your application, you really want to read and follow the guidelines, follow the process of the application, all the instructions. Use the talent in your community. There will be people who are strong at writing applications or great at planning, great at budgets, great at financials. Use those people around you. Make sure that, that you tell a compelling story about why it's important to your community. The grant writing stage is, I guess, where most people, that's where most of our energy goes. It's those first two stages that will help you to write that application. So when you're writing the grant application, make sure that you're avoiding technical language, using really clear language that's accessible. Use evidence to support your claims, and assume that we know nothing about your organisation, your project or community. That makes it much easier for us to get the information that we need. And make sure that you're really clear about what you're going to use the requested funds for. FRRR's application process has deliberately been kept as straightforward and as simple because we really want to support grassroots communities to apply for funds, and we don't expect those that are applying for funds to be grant writers. Okay, so always worth getting somebody to triple check your application and your budget and attach all the requested documents. This is not something that we have time to always follow up on, so where you can provide the support material is really, really helpful. The more information we have, the better. So good practice, not just for FRRR grants, but for all grant applications. Know your organisation and make sure that you have people that are on board with your project. Check if you need help. Check with the funding body. Allow plenty of time to get your application in, and make sure that you provide those extra attachments and supporting documentation. So what's not going to help the causes is asking for more money, not answering the questions properly, and not providing the information as requested. And the reporting part is really just about quitting your grant so you can apply for more as well, but also sharing your story and also just documenting the success and also the things that didn't work so well with the project. We love this part. This is where we actually see those grants really making a difference in community. So that brings to this next section, which is the grants in action part. And these stories really come from those final reports. So this story is a project that happened in the Cummins area in South Australia with many Year 10 students experiencing a lack of direction and motivation. The small grant, for Rural Communities grant, allowed 21 students to participate in a personal leadership program, and the early intervention prevention model was really designed to influence their lives positively. So this group managed to evaluate from the beginning, and so had really great stats around how it had changed conditions or circumstances for these young people, and it is something that we see a lot of applications coming through for community wellbeing, both for young people and all demographics and communities. Our next story is the Desert Uplands Bring Back the Groove. So this organisation saw the need to get people off the land for a night. So really just supporting cultural vibrancy, but that's that community connectedness. which is so pivotal to communities in rural, regional and remote Australia. So this was an opportunity to socialise and reconnect with neighbours, and the landholders also heard from mental health and wellbeing experts. So part of the project was covering the costs of bringing people into these communities to just support local members around wellbeing. And they could talk about some of the different strategies that could be used on farms as well, and just an amazing opportunity to be able to connect and get together. So two really good examples of such small amounts of funds really able to really leverage and support those communities to connect. This is another festival application with a small grant of only 4,500, supporting a group of writers to develop a festival that was really around engaging professional writers in an educational interactive festival over the course of a week, and supporting schools as well, and really broad beneficiaries for this project. The Feast of Words Festival was also able to support students that might have difficulty with English, and just really strengthen their confidence and their capability through this festival. So going to this next case study, this one's more of an example of how amenities and infrastructure can really support communities as well. So the Leeton Community Op Shop installed a stainless steel service bench in their kitchen because they needed to be able to support their volunteers and also their community members through the local op shop. So this op shop was really more than just a shop. It was really looking to address homelessness and social disadvantage and social isolation, and be really inclusive about how they do that. So they received a $5,000 grant through the Aussie Cotton Farmers Grow Communities grant program, and to develop a kitchen to feed a lot of those people that were accessing the space, and look at improving that community wellbeing. This project was in a remote community in the Northern Territory, in the Gilmingan community, and was looking at dealing with the challenges of drug and alcohol abuse. So through this one was identified as a particular need through the Haywire grant program, and they received, again, a small grant, $8,000 to support the specialist drama teacher to script and perform and record a film exploring the effects of drug and alcohol abuse. And this film was then premiered at a series of drug and alcohol-free events and attracted really broad community participation and acclaim. And I think this may be one of the last case studies. This one is the Gulf Grazers Beef Up Showcase, a slightly larger grant through the Tackling Tough Times Together grant program. So this one was an event to build resilience in the areas of Queensland, and brought together industry and supply chain experts to provide an update to the grazing community on innovative beef production research and management practices as well. Participants fed back that they felt really engaged and connected, and really enjoyed the opportunity to connect and learn from one another, as well as from those industry experts. I think a highlight of this was also the gala ball at the end of the 2 days. Okay, so I'm just going to put my camera back on just to wind up. So That was a bit of a whirlwind trip through our grant programs and our grant seeker presentation. We've got a lot of information on our website that we hope that you'll access. There's the e-newsletter that Lindsay shared before. Our grants calendar will give you up-to-date information. We have tips and hints on writing grant applications, and we have some video resources as well that are just short, sharp little clips that will help you to write strong applications. And we also have the group resource page as well on how to just how to profile the project that you may have secured funding for. So so from here on, I'm very happy to answer any questions. Sorry, I've run pretty much to time, but would welcome any questions either today or through our emails or phone calls.
Thank you so much, Carleen, on behalf of the team at Bushels. Everyone's had their cuppa today. I've just finished mine.
Yes.
Bank of Ideas. Yes, mine is a little bit too now. Bank of Ideas and Rural Aid. We knew today's session was so important because regional and rural communities are often seeking just that boost to get their idea to come to fruition, to get that last bit of financial support that they need to make it all happen. We thought it was really important today for you to cover off what you did, the crucial elements of coming together as a team and as a community to do a really good application, not just for the application's sake, but also so that the project is really well thought through and all the I's are dotted and the T's across. So a big thank you to you today. We've got a couple of great sessions coming up over the next few weeks. We have Shane Fitzsimmons, formerly of the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, now with New South Wales Resilience, a new government agency. He will be joining us next week to talk about youth leadership. Of course, if you saw his Australian story, you'll know that he was made a very young Rural Fire Service captain at the age of 19. We want to talk to him about how we identify people in our communities that are future leaders and how we foster that leadership. We want to talk, of course, about resilience and recovery and rebuilding communities, given the vast array of challenges we've been thrown in Australia in the last few months. And we also have coming up in the next few weeks the youngest mayor in Western Australia. We've got the brains behind the Bite from the Bush campaign, but I've just sent you all the links for those sessions. So have a wonderful Tuesday and a great week. On behalf of Peter Kenyon and I at Bank of Ideas and Rural Aid, have a wonderful week, and we look forward to seeing you at the remainder of our Community Builders webinar series.